Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and to be back to the conference after a pause of several years. And it's interesting how some of the problems keep coming back and some of them change and mutate in form. Since already in overtime, I will just like to make perhaps three very brief remarks on what I've heard so far, including the presentations we had in the morning from the Prime Minister. One broad trend which Ivan Krastev forgot to mention in the economic sphere is quite simply that what we are seeing is a process of concentration of economic activity in the core of Europe, basically in Germany and the countries surrounding Germany, Holland, and northwestern Europe. And those countries, those new member countries in the European Union, which have been able to grow, are those which have been able to integrate themselves in that broader economic area by participating in that value chain. And now what are the key requirements to be able to do that, to integrate yourself with the core of Europe? And I think it is infrastructure, but both hard and soft. I think people who are in business know that it's not just a question of having motorways and highways and airports, but you also have the trust in the judicial system, in the court system, in your trading partners, that you can send a piece over, it's being worked on, it's being sent back on time, and if there's a problem, problems are being dealt with very quickly. So I think what is sometimes being forgotten is that these two are complementary. Motorways, even the best motorways, without a traditional system which works and a broader administrative system which works, are basically useless. You remain poor. Of course, having only a good court system and administrative system without any roads and motorways is also no good. But what you really need to make sure that you do is that you have advances on both. Advances on one front only risk being useless. The second point which has come up is the cost of energy. It's quite clear that here in Europe we will never be able to compete on cheap energy compared to the US or compete also to the Middle East. But Bulgaria, of course, has a particular handicap because it pays more for energy than other European countries. And that is because it depends essentially for gas on one supplier, Russia, which is not behaving like a competitive supplier, but extracts as much money as it can from small countries which are depending on them. Therefore, the simple solution which I would propose is that there are a number of Eastern European countries which are in a similar situation. They could just band together and create a joint purchasing agency for natural gas. That would mean that then you're no longer one single player dependent on Russia, but many together, which buy a much larger amount. And if you have the appropriate interconnectors, there's also much more flexibility. Bulgaria needs less gas, but Hungary or Poland more. You can transport it from one to the other, or one can ask more and the other can less. And you get away from these take or pay contracts where sometimes you are forced to pay for gas which you don't need. That is actually a private sector solution which could be adopted even without any intervention by the EU. The two largest gas companies in Japan actually are doing that on their own because they have found it useful to buy larger quantities, to make some offset within that group. And I think that would be one occasion for Bulgaria to make a concrete step to lower significantly the cost at least of one component of energy, which is natural gas. Again, it can be done in conjunction with the European Union, but you don't need a European initiative. You can do it basically with your other neighbors, and I think you'll find a willing ear because many of them are in a similar situation. They're paying much more for natural gas than companies in Germany are paying. Lithuania, or was it Latvia? I think one of the countries there built a huge LNG terminal for liquefied gas, which the country didn't really need. But the day the terminal became operating, it suddenly got a big discount from Gazprom on its own gas. So that was the way basically to get a better price by showing to the supplier that you have alternative sources, and then the situation changes quite quickly, and you can hope to get much better terms and reduce the price of energy and the cost of energy for your economy. But I think the biggest problem at present is certainly the financial system. And I would say the importance of the financial system, a properly functioning financial system, is often underestimated. I've heard a lot of talk about the Euro funds and how many billions there are. But every year the financial system of Bulgaria intermediates more than the Euro funds. So it's really of crucial importance for Bulgaria that the funds, the savings which people bring to their banks, that they're then invested in a way that allows to profitable projects to be done, firms to grow. And I think part of the low growth we have seen in Bulgaria is the fact that increasingly the financial system has stopped working properly. I think the KTB case, in a certain sense, is the tip of an iceberg. It's a pretty big iceberg by itself, but it's really a signal that something fundamentally is not working. And what is not working, as I said, is that the savings which exist are not being used in an efficient way. And I think that should be the key way to judge a financial system, not whether it is stable, not whether you don't have bank insolvencies. I think the key issue is whether the system actually allows profitable investment to be financed. And the simple way to see whether that has happened is by looking at what happens with the recovery of the funds from KTB. Because if the recovery rate is high, it means that the bank actually financed something sensible. If the recovery rate is low, it means there was waste, related party lending, corruption, whatever. So my view would be that you shouldn't measure government on the efficiency of a supervisory system by how much money is being paid out to people, but by how much money you get back. If you think about the biggest bank insolvencies which we have had in Europe over the last years, the Icelandic banks and Lehman. In both cases, initially it appeared catastrophe, but after a while, the supervisors got there, they dug out what assets are there, and both in the case of Lehman and the Icelandic banks, the recovery rate was close to 80–90%. So in the end, we saw there was a lot of hype, a lot of misinvestment in real estate and so on, but something valuable stayed. And when I hear about recovery rates of 20–30% for KTB, I must say something must really have gone very wrong. And I think the recovery rate will also be one of the key indicators which the European partners will use to say, can we take Bulgaria within the banking union? Right? Is this a system which is on its own strong enough? I think some of you said that we can always run to Europe and say, reform our institutions. There has to be a minimum of trust that things are being taken care of at home in a sensible way. So to repeat, my way to look at the financial system would be to say, what is the recovery rate on KTB, for example, and that gives us an indication how much money was really wasted. And of course, another indicator which supervisors use all the world over is alarm bells ring when banks promise high interest rates on insured deposits. So that basically is the Ponzi scheme which we know. The banks attract a lot of deposits, and then if things go bad, somebody else pays, and that somebody else is a deposit insurance fund, which in Bulgaria is very strong, or was very strong until recently. But why? Because in Bulgaria there's a tax on deposits. We have a tax on deposits to finance deposit insurance fund all over the world. But the Bulgarian tax is 10 times as high as the one in the European Union or in the United States. That's a tax like whatever, VAT or any other tax. It's just that people don't perceive it that way. And as I said, it's 10 times as high as in other countries. That indicates that there's something wrong in this system because all of the funds accumulated by this very high tax are already gone. And more had to be put in by the government. So I think the government is right in saying we would like to get into banking union. And I think that is actually not something that is just a choice, but it's also a necessity. Because, as you know, from this year onwards, basically, if you want to join the euro area, you also have to join banking union. The two go together in a package now. But that means that the qualification for joining the euro is no longer just the budget deficit, the exchange rate, or the ERM. It's also the state of your financial supervision. And the one way you can alleviate that fear is by making, of course, first the adjustments at home, and then asking to be admitted into banking union before you are in monetary union, because then there will be perhaps a couple of years where the ECB can take over or has taken over the supervision of banks in this country, and where you can also join gradually the Single Resolution Fund, which comes with the entry into the banking union. And this fund, again, is very important because it would allow Bulgaria to offset regional shocks. For example, if you have another real estate boom and bust, the burden would not be borne only by Bulgaria, but also by this fund. But you can imagine that the partners of Bulgaria will be extremely reluctant to admit a country to the system where they see things happening as they're happening right now. With, as I said, banks promising very high deposit rates when one doesn't know whether actually the returns on the investments are there. So I would say if the overall strategic aim is to join the euro, the first order of business is, of course, keep the budget deficit under control. But the second one, which is becoming as important, is to clean up the supervisory system and make sure that you gain the trust of your partners, that they can let Bulgaria in, and that the ECB will actually be willing to take over the control of a banking system over which it has, from Frankfurt, very little direct control. So it has to have some confidence that when you give an order from Frankfurt, it's being implemented here on the ground. And that brings us back to the key role of having strong institutions, institutions which are up to the standards of the European level. That is important for the general development of the country, but it's even more important and key in the financial area, and that's one of the first steps that should be undertaken. Thank you very much.